Commissioner Asonio,
Present.
Chairperson Bigham,
Present.
Commissioner Bennett, absent. Commissioner Contreras, absent. Commissioner McGregor,
Present.
Commissioner Mancera,
Present.
Commissioner Schumacher.
Present.
All right, time for general public comment. Any general public comment? Anyone in the, no? How about on Zoom? Is there anyone on Zoom? No? Oh, that makes that easy. All right, I guess we will move to the consent agenda. We have 3 items, pretty standard. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull for discussion? All right.
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Moved and seconded. All right.
Commissioner Asonio,
Aye.
Chairperson Bigham,
Aye.
Commissioner Contreras, absent. Commissioner McGregor,
Aye.
Commissioner Mancera,
Aye.
Commissioner Schumacher.
Aye.
Make sure the paperwork gets done. Okay, we're moving on to the presentation. I understand we have a presentation on the Airport Economic Impact Study by Patrick Heaton.
Yes, we do.
Thank you,
So
sir.
before I introduce Patrick Heaton on line here, this is a four-way airport economic impact study. It's been long in the process. I just first of all want to give a shout out to Kimley Horn for producing such a great product. This was a culmination of a couple years of work with the airport managers and directors. So long, in fact, when I was the airport manager over at the Marina Municipal Airport, that's when we first started it. So it took about 2.5 years to corral the various airports together. So Brett Godin, my predecessor, had one conducted around 2018, I believe. And with this one, we decided to have 4 airports come in and see what synergies are derived from it, as well as independent numbers supporting the business and what kind of revenues are generated at our own independent airports. So Patrick Heaton is on the line here. Patrick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we need to put one on microphone on mute there, please, Susan. Okay, try again, Patrick.
Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Apologies. We're having a little bit of issues there. Are you also able to hear my colleague, Drew Latouche? Drew, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm online. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you both. Thank you.
Perfect.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you all so much for coming in. Susan, if you'd like to advance the slides. So as Matthew said, we just finished up the 2025 or 2026 economic impact study for Salinas Municipal Airport. My name is Patrick Heaton. I am the Kimley Horn project manager for the economic impact study. I'm joined today by Drew Latouche, who was our lead planner on the study. We're going to give you a brief overview of the study today, how it was done, some of the key findings, terminology, and things. And we'll have a few minutes for you to ask any questions you have of us at the end. So without further ado, we can get started. We will, Susan, are you able to present, or I'm not sure if you all are able to see the screen with the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So we will start with the contents of this presentation. First, we'll look at what an economic impact study is and kind of the purpose of it, why we do it. And then we'll talk about some of the key terminology used throughout the economic impact study, because it's really important to understand these terms so you can understand how the results were developed and what they actually represent. From there, we'll talk through the findings of the 2024 Salinas Municipal Airport Economic Impact Study, highlighting the airport's current, at that time, economic contributions, and then discuss some of the additional airport impact analyses that present some of the non-traditional impacts that the airport has and the way it plays a role in the community. Then, like I said, we'll wrap up for a few minutes of questions for you at the end. So we'll start on slide 3 with what an economic impact study is. And moving on from that to the next slide, an economic impact study is really meant to quantify the economic activity that occurs as a result of the airport. And this study examined the employment and monetary impacts of both the airport as an entity, so Matt's team, as well as the businesses located on site, as well as the impacts of visitors that fly into Salinas and then spend money in Monterey County's economy. So we'll discuss some of these activities, and some of the additional analyses that I mentioned are somewhat non-traditional a little later on. But really, before we go any further, on slide 5, I want to discuss what an economic impact study is and what it is not, and what it does and does not do. So I think it's really important to understand before you talk about the results of everything. An economic impact study is really meant to convey the qualitative and quantitative impacts of the airport in Monterey County's economy on its residents, businesses, and visitors. The economic impact study, you may hear us call it an AEIS, examines all sorts of different things, but really is meant to tell the story of how and why the airport is important to the local community and local economy. At the end of the study, the deliverables we produce are really going to tell that story, and we'll share those with you today so that hopefully you as the Airport Commission can further disseminate that information out in the community. The things that the economic impact study does not do, however, is also equally important. So an economic impact study is not a forward-looking document. As I mentioned, it is only capturing the impacts of Salinas Municipal Airport in 2024. That was our last year of full data. And is not meant to influence business or operational decisions moving forward. Unlike an airport master plan, it is not creating recommendations for future developments, anything like that. It's simply just here's what the airport is doing today. And when you string multiple together, like we have at Salinas, then you can see that growth across the years. And then finally, an economic impact study is not meant to serve as a return on investment analysis. So it's not like if you do this for the airport, you will get this money back. As I said, it's just very, very informational of what the airport is currently contributing, and it can help influence, the decisions the city makes and the state makes to make further investments in the airport. So discussing why the airport actually did this. As Matthew mentioned, this was about a 2.5-year effort. We started the project really in earnest. They started the procurement process in about mid-2024. We were able to actually get underway in 2025, early 25, using that full year of 2024 data to look at the impacts of the airport administration and its on-site businesses, as well as to estimate the visitors that are flying into Monterey County using Salinas Airport and the impacts they contribute to Monterey County's hospitality sectors. We also, as Matthew mentioned, partnered with the Marina, Hollister, and Watsonville municipal airports, not only to just gain some economies of scale in terms of some of the analyses we were doing all together, but also to provide a regional overview of the economic activity that is generated by general aviation or GA airports in the Monterey Bay region, because so many of them are very similar and really contribute to the same activities. So we'll now turn it over to Drew on slide 7 to talk about some of the economic terms, measures, and categories.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. As kind of we just mentioned here, now that we've covered what an AEIS is and what its purpose is, we wanted to just take a few moments to define some of the key terms used in our study And again, this will really help us to interpret some of the results more clearly and understand how we really conducted the analysis. So starting on slide 8, economic impacts are generally grouped into 4 buckets. Starting from the left, we have employment. This really constitutes all the full-time and part-time employment. Next, we've got payroll, and as the name suggests, represents the total compensation of full-time and part-time employees, and including benefits and, of course, wages. And then it also includes all the taxes paid on behalf of the employees as well. The next category is value added. Value added refers to the airport's contribution to Monterey County's gross regional product, which is a subset of the GDP, or gross domestic product, and includes payroll profits, and then taxes paid by businesses due to aeronautical activity at the airport. And then lastly, our last bucket here is output. So output includes payroll, value added, and then those total expenditures of the airport's administration, capital improvements, and then any visitor spending. Sometimes output is referred to, has a few different names. Sometimes it's referred to as like business revenues or sales, or simply economic activity, or in our case, impact. So moving on to slide 9. These are our sources of economic activity. So we'll dive into these here. We divide them into 2 different categories. There's on-airport activity and off-airport activity. On-airport activity is constituted of the airport administration, so the folks that run the day-to-day operations of the airport, like Matt and his staff, any groundskeepers, folks of that nature that help the airport run smoothly. It also includes airport business tenants. So these are tenants that operate directly on the airport property. This includes like flight schools, aircraft paint shops, maintenance shops, and other types of businesses that really contribute to the airport's overall economic footprint. And then lastly, on the on-airport activity, there's capital improvement expenditures. We also looked at these again, both by the airport and its tenants, because they reflect the impact of infrastructure investments made on the airport grounds. And these also include any state, local, or federal funds. Again, kind of all-inclusive for those capital expenditures. And then for off-airport activity, we have general aviation visitor spending, or GA visitor spending. This includes any new money spent in Monterey County, typically in the hospitality-related sectors, from folks traveling from outside of the county. So think of folks spending money on, lodging, recreational activity, any other types of goods and services. One maybe pertinent example would be like Monterey Car Week, when visitors fly in from other areas. They fly into Salinas to go to Monterey Car Week. They may stay in Salinas and drive out there. That's all kind of included in that off-airport activity. We can go to slide 10. And here we have our economic impact categories that we calculated in the study. So we have our direct impacts, which includes the on and off airport activity generated by the airport. We have our secondary impacts, which includes both the indirect and direct impacts. Indirect impacts really refers to those revenues or that are used to purchase goods and services within the Monterey County, for at different types of businesses, and those induced impacts refer to that income that's earned by workers that's again spent in Monterey County or in the study region. And then altogether, the direct impacts and the secondary impacts equal our total impacts in those 4 different buckets, or those measures that we discussed previously. And next, we wanted to go over just our study methodology, kind of the way we went about the study, and then some of our data collection that we did to help us calculate the airport's impacts. So starting on slide 12 here, the study really started with a comprehensive data collection effort. and that was within each source of economic activity. These inputs really helped us to calculate our multiplier effects, which were done through the InPlan economic modeling software. InPlan, it's just a well-known kind of industry standard modeling software. It uses several federal and state resources to kind of fill out like different types of labor statistics and things like that. So with InPlan, that kind of helped us fill in any remaining data gaps. And then we were able to calculate those secondary impacts for the airport. And then again, those were summed with the total, or the direct impacts to reach our total impacts there. And then with that InPlan, we were also able to use that to calculate the total tax revenues generated at the local, state, and federal levels. And then beyond just the kind of the quantitative side, we also looked at some additional analyses, some additional airport impacts, and those are those 4 green boxes that you can see there. So we'll go over those a little bit more in detail, but I just wanted to touch on them briefly. We looked at the value of based aircraft. We looked at reliant business impacts in the local community, potential impacts to nearby real estate in the Salinas area or surrounding the airport, and then some of the unique impacts, some of the qualitative impacts of the airport. And we put all these together and we developed a communications toolkit, which is really intended for your use for future outreach efforts to really share the results of the study. So next we'll go on to slide 13, and we'll just touch briefly on some of the data collection that we did. So it really started off with, we sent the airport an RFI. This allowed us to gather some of the information that you can see here, some of the airport's financials, payroll, tax revenue records, airport operations, things of that nature. And that really teed us up for our next data collection effort, which was the business tenant surveys. So we had a team that went out there. We did some site visits. We administered a business tenant survey to collect some each business tenant's data, things like what services they provided, employment levels, and then the capital expenditure over the past 5 years. And all these kind of data points really contribute to the airport's overall airport activity and helps us understand, kind of what the impacts are. And then moving on to our last data collection effort was visiting pilot and passenger survey that we deployed. This was deployed digitally to all 4 airports, so Hollister, Marina, Salinas, and Watsonville, and it was really aimed at gathering that firsthand visitor spending information. The survey asked pretty simple questions, things like how big was your party size, how long did you stay here, and then asked an estimation of the money they spent on some of those common categories. And this data was then processed and compared to InPlan's industry data to estimate the average amount of money spent by GA visitors, and that's sometimes also referred to as a visitor spending profile. So once this data was collected, we were able to clean it and verify it with the airport, and then use that to model some of the impacts, those being secondary impacts and then the total results. So now that we've gone over some of the terms or methodologies and the data collection, I'll hand it back over to Patrick so he can talk about some of the exciting results of the study.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew. Appreciate that. I will pause just for a quick second for the commission. Are there any questions about the terms or methodology that we used in the study before we dive into the results?
I'm not sure if you'd call it methodology. I'm going to assume that's what it is. Excuse me. So a lot of the things I heard listed sounded as though they were kind of the day-to-day things that take place at the airport. Did it also take into account the special events that take place, such as, say, the air show, the car show, other things that take place on the property?
Yes, we did. Some of that is more qualitative in information just because of the scope of the economic analysis. Typically, in that case, you'd want to do surveying of those specific events, and just with the timing of the study, that did not occur. But we definitely captured the story of that, and it does relate to the economic impacts, and that's where it's kind of telling that full story behind everything, and I think that will help really convey the impacts to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, well, then we'll move on to slide 15, which is the big reveal for all of you. So without further ado, I'm happy to share that Salinas Municipal Airport supports 401 total jobs, there we go, paying $32.2 million in payroll, contributing to about $45.9 million of value added to the gross regional product, and $72.5 million in that total output, or what we'll call the total economic impact of the airport. As Drew mentioned, these impacts are comprised of the on-airport activities and the off-airport visitor spending activities. So you can see that most of the impacts come from those on-airport activities, with about 338 jobs, $27.9 million in payroll, $39.1 million of value added, and $62.5 million of output. And this really reflects Salinas's role as an economic engine for the local economy. There are a lot of different types of businesses on site that contribute to the economy through, advanced innovation like Archer, to even the hometown feel of, the airport cafe there. And either way, they all contribute to that local economic impact. On the flip side, off-airport visitor spending is estimated to support about 63 jobs, $4.2 million of payroll, $6.8 million of value added, and roughly $10 million of output. And this really reflects the airport's role as a vital gateway to the region. As Drew mentioned, you've got Monterey Car Week, you've got the air show, all of those different events that bring people into Salinas using the airport and then support that local hospitality sector. Altogether, these findings really make clear how important the airport is to the local economy, which is the ultimate goal of this study, is to demonstrate that. So before we go any further, we'll go to the next slide, and I want to compare to the 2020 economic benefit analysis results. This is what Matt mentioned at the beginning. This is the previous version of this study. It used 2019 data, so it was a 5-year gap between the 2019 data and the 2024 data we used in this study, and really will demonstrate the growth in economic activity that has occurred at the airport between these two studies. So looking first at the jobs or the employment there, you can see coincidentally that the total number of jobs has actually remained unchanged between the two studies. It's been 401 both times, and that really is somewhat just a coincidence and is less so indicative of economic stagnation. And this is really important to note because the on-airport jobs have actually increased from 327 to 338. That's indicative of more business tenant employment, whereas the visitor spending impacts have decreased from about 74 to 63. This isn't to say that you've lost visitor spending impacts. It's just more so a reflection of some of the larger industry trends related to basically people are doing more with less now. So you're seeing higher payrolls and higher output per job. And so a given amount of visitor spending is going to support fewer jobs. We've got electronic kiosks at restaurants and things nowadays. That is some of the reasoning for that number of total jobs to be the same between 2019 and 2024. On the flip side of that, we can see in our monetary impacts a lot of great growth. Payroll increased from about 26.8 million to 32.2 million, which is about a 20% increase, while the output increased from about 61.6 to 72.5 million, which is a 17.8% increase. So in both cases, really great to see. We've seen a lot of growth that's outpacing inflation, that's outpacing regional growth, and really demonstrates that Salinas is growing its economic footprint. I do want to note that the value added was not calculated in the prior study, so that $45.9 million cannot be compared. However, value added is a direct subset of that output, so it's likely that that increased as well. So as I said, all of this is really showing that strong growth between the studies and over the years, and is really a reflection of the different activities that not only the airport administration is presenting, but also all of those visitors and on-site businesses. So we'll move on now to slide 17, which is our tax revenue impacts. And in addition to the economic activity that I just mentioned, that's basically money flowing out into the economy. Tax revenue impacts basically reflect the fiscal contributions that aviation activity related to the airport makes from basically three separate pots into the local, county, state, and federal levels. So our three areas of taxable aviation activities include on-airport activities, which differ slightly from the on-airport activities that Drew just mentioned. These are more related to like sales of fuel, rental cars, retail, the on-site restaurant, some of the services construction. The visitor spending is very similar to the visitor spending Drew mentioned. It's the actual spending in those five main hospitality sectors. And then the final area of aviation activity that's taxable is what we call the employee area. And these are going to be employees of airport administration, on-airport businesses, construction, and any visitor-supported businesses. And basically the payroll and the income taxes that those employees pay contribute to that pot. So looking now at the 2024 total revenue impacts, you can see that the state and federal level comprises the largest component of the $11.8 million of total tax revenues. About $10.3 million collectively go to the state and local level. This is really driven by those 338 employees that I mentioned on airport just a second ago, because all of those pay a lot of Social Security and Medicare taxes at that state and federal level that drive a lot of that tax revenue. On the flip side, the county and local taxes are made up of mostly property and sales taxes paid for by users, employees, and businesses. And so those contribute just over $1.5 million. All combined, as I said, the airport's on-airport activities and visitor spending contribute about $11.8 million. And just for comparison, in the 2020 study, for 2019, Salinas Municipal Airport contributed about $9.8 million of tax revenue. So we're again seeing a 20% increase between studies. So those are the big numbers I want to share with you. Now I want to go into some of those additional analyses that Drew just shared and talk through some of the non-traditional ways that the airport benefits the community. So we'll skip ahead to slide 19 now, please. And we'll talk about the first analysis, which is our value of based aircraft. So as you all are very aware, the airport represents a significant public investment in the facilities it has, but it also protects a lot of private investments in the form of based aircraft. Individuals and businesses in Salinas and the surrounding area trust the airport to protect their based aircraft because they know it's a safe place to store it, and their investment that can sometimes be either their livelihood or an investment that is worth, thousands or millions of dollars even. So what we did for this analysis was we reviewed tax data from the Monterey County Assessor's Office to assess the values of the 136 based aircraft at the airport in 2024. In total, they had a combined value of about $54.2 million, with an average value of just over $398,000 apiece and a median value of just over $80,000. The reason we report the average and the median is because a lot of the based aircraft there at Salinas are those single-engine piston that typically have a lower value per aircraft. So that's going to bring that median down. But then there are a few big jets there and turboprops, like the ones you can see here on the screen, that bring that average up because they have a substantially higher value. So that's why you can see that discrepancy. The second analysis I want to talk about on the next slide here is our impacts to nearby real estate. And so for this, what we did was we looked at the relationship between residential property value and proximity to the airport, because these values can fluctuate sometimes due to exposure to aircraft noise and operations. What we did was we created 4 separate areas and then established the median and average value per residential property per acre to assess what that relationship looked like. So we first looked at the quarter mile, which you can see there in the blue on the screen, then the half-mile radius, then the 1 mile radius. And within that 1 mile radius is what we call the airport influence area. So it's the area that's directly affected by aircraft noise and operations. It's typically going to align with some of those noise contours you may have seen in a master plan before, but really represents where the traffic pattern is that you're going to have aircraft flying over at a low altitude. We then compared that with a 5-mile control sample. So we took residential properties within 5 miles of Salinas Airport, just to make sure we were comparing to a local sample to see what the relationship was. The analysis found that the properties within that half-mile radius had the lowest median value per acre. And this probably is more likely due to some of the less dense neighborhoods that are there on the north side of the airport, and a lot of those industrial parcels on the south side that are not included in the analysis. So it basically just brings a smaller sample size that is going to cause that median to fluctuate. However, the really important part here is that the average value within the airport influence area, either quarter, half, or 1 mile radius, all had a higher property value average than the control sample. And so what this basically demonstrates is that the immediate area surrounding the airport has higher residential property values, and just demonstrates kind of that economic hub that we were describing the airport being. You know, people are wanting to come to the airport to spend money at the local businesses. They work at these local businesses. And so by proxy, some of those nearby residents are going to have a higher value by acre. The third specialty analysis that we looked at was our off-airport reliant businesses, here on the next slide. And in this, the first part of the analysis I talked about a few minutes ago was looking at those on-airport businesses with employees on site. However, that does not represent the only economic activity that is generated by the airport's operations. There are also what we call these off-airport reliant businesses that represent businesses that don't have employees on site, but still use the airport or airports in some capacity to conduct business. And so what we did was we looked at 16 potentially reliant industries based on just our experience and feedback from Matt's team to understand what some of the local industries were that use airports, and then assessed the approximate value of those businesses that use the airport for doing things like supporting travel of either staff between company locations, bringing in customers from outside of the region to Monterey or Salinas to do business, or to ship parts and goods, or even conduct flight testing or access other markets. So what we found within these 16 reliant industries was about 640 what we'll call potentially reliant businesses. So we don't know for sure if each and every business actually uses Salinas, but we can interpolate from our information, from our experience in nationwide studies like this, and from feedback from the airport to estimate what % of those businesses' activities are associated with airport activity. We can then take that and we translate that into output, the term that Drew mentioned earlier, and we can use IMPLAN to equate that to the number of jobs that would be supported by businesses that are using the airport. So with this, we estimate that about 149 total jobs are supported by off-airport reliant businesses as a result of the airport, contributing about $11.6 million in payroll, $16.7 million value added, and a total of $26.9 million output. Now, these numbers are great, and they're obviously communicated in that same set of 4 measures that Drew mentioned and I presented earlier. But the one thing I do want to caveat with these is that just the available data we have, we're not able to go out and talk to all 640 businesses and ask them which airport you're using. Sometimes they're using a mix of airports. Sometimes they're based at like Watsonville, but they use Salinas. And so we don't want to add these numbers here to the total economic impacts on the screen, just because it actually degrades the credibility of the study sometimes, because it is more difficult to directly attribute them to the airport and to Salinas specifically. So we present this, but we just want to caveat that for you to keep in mind as we walk through this in the deliverables. The fourth and final analysis here on slide 22 is something that I'm sure as the Airport Commission, you guys are all familiar with. But really, it is telling the story of the airport. And so the economic impact study included a few qualitative analyses, basically telling the stories of unique impacts or unique activities that are occurring there at Salinas Airport that really contribute to the community and just show the role that may not be otherwise understood just from the numbers. So I've highlighted just a few here on the screen. I'm sure you're all familiar with these. But we've got things like Archer Aviation, which is our Advanced Air Mobility or AAM company on site. They are testing their Midnight aircraft, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing or eVTOL aircraft. Salinas is their primary test facility. We've also got the California International Air Show. I'm sure all of you have attended that before. That draws in as many as 35,000 visitors to the airport each year. That really elevates the visibility of the airport, not only for the local community, but puts Salinas on the map. You know, there are people that travel around from around the world to come see the air shows, demonstrations, and displays, and really understand what general aviation looks like on a day-to-day basis. And then the third and final activity I want to highlight is probably the most unique. That's the Bob Hoover Academy and the partnership between the airport and the Monterey County Office of Education. And the Bob Hoover Academy was established to empower those local at-risk youth to finish their high school education through an alternative education program. So they are able to do things like flight training, have classes on aircraft design and engineering, and look into advanced technologies to really position themselves for success in college and in the workforce. And this is just, in a personal opinion, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a general aviation airport. And it really just underscores the value that airports have in, you know, breaking a cycle of poverty that exists within the Salinas Valley for a lot of families. And so I think this is just a great program that should be highlighted. With all of these, you know, I'm just showing a brief overview, but all of the stories will be captured in the deliverables we have, and really will be telling the story. And that's what I would invite you to use those deliverables, is to really amplify that story for the airport to all of the community. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Drew now to actually talk through those deliverables so you can understand what we're looking at and what we've produced.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you for going over those additional analyses and also going into detail about the economic impacts. So now just to kind of round us out, we wanted to, again, as Patrick mentioned, share some of the final deliverables for our study and maybe highlight some of the target audiences that you can you know, deploy the different deliverables to as you use them for Salinas. So we can go to slide 24. I'll get that started. So overall, we put everything together in a communications toolkit. It includes all the deliverables that we have kind of discussed today. And it's intended, again, to reach a wide array of audiences to really communicate those study results. So our primary deliverable that we have is that technical report. It provides that detailed documentation of the methodology, the data, all the results, everything that we went over today. And then that technical report also includes an executive summary. And that really highlights some of the key points of the study, and provides them in a little bit more digestible format, so those can be distributed to you know, key stakeholders or other maybe elected officials that you would want to share the results of the study with. And then moving on, we have the airport primer brochure for Salinas. So this presents the impacts of Salinas in a shorter and a little bit easier to understand format. And this primer brochure is really meant to be shared with nearly any audience. So our intent when we created it was for it to be really public facing, posted maybe on the airport's website or at City Hall, printed out and shared to really all the stakeholders, everybody in the community. And we really highly encourage that. Again, that's the intent behind that deliverable specifically, so that it can really communicate not only the economic impacts, but also the social impacts and some of those really unique and cool things that Patrick mentioned. And then finally, we have the Monterey Bay Area Regional Overview brochure. That brochure summarizes the economic impacts of Salinas, as well as Hollister Marina and Watsonville, so those 4 airports in that Monterey Bay area, and highlights some of the key activities that are occurring at all 4 airports, and really their impact, the impact of general aviation, or the economic impact of general aviation in the Monterey Bay area. So in that brochure, it really highlights, and again, as Patrick and I have mentioned, some of those really unique things like AAM development, which kind of helps, and goes hand in hand with some of the really cool stuff that they're doing at the Bob Hoover Academy. There's things like firefighting, aerial firefighting, and law enforcement, air ambulance operations. All of these activities take place at airports in the Monterey Bay area and are highlighted in that overview brochure. So we highly encourage that you share that as well, so people can really, understand the value of the community and where they live. So altogether, again, that's our kind of communications toolkit. There's one addition or 2 additional things. Of course, this PowerPoint presentation, we've shared it with Matt previously. It's yours to use as well, to distribute to other folks as you see fit. And then we also sent Matt a GIS database, which includes a summary of some of those key data points that we also have mentioned previously, some of the things about the real estate analysis and other analyses that we perform. So that's our communications toolkit, and that's our presentation overall. We thank you for your time. And Patrick, unless you have any other comments, I think we can kind of turn it back to the commission members and have some time for question and discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. The one thing I'll just note is, so all of the deliverables in the toolkit have been completed. Matt and his team now have them. So if you had any further questions about them, feel free to go through, and the technical report really has all of the details. But if you do have any questions, feel free to direct them to Matt and he can come to me. But I'll open the floor now for the commission members if there are any other questions about our presentation or the results tonight.
Go for it. Yeah, just so that I understand, the presentation was looking at 4 airports and the impact on Marina, Salinas, Watsonville, and Hollister. But this seemed to be the economics of Salinas. It didn't mention Marina or Joby or Wick and Hollister, or anything going on over in Watsonville. Are those separate presentations? What am I missing?
Yeah, and I apologize for the slight miscommunication, I guess we'll call the documentation of the study. But with the study, what was done was basically 4 economic impact studies in one. So each airport got its own set of deliverables. The technical report, the primer brochure, is unique to Salinas, is unique to Marina and Hollister and Watsonville. We do include some of that documentation of all 4 in that overview brochure that Drew mentioned. But really, this is meant to be a very dedicated tool for Salinas specifically to be able to demonstrate its economic impacts for Salinas Municipal Airport. And then that overview brochure and some of the additional documentation is really supposed to present that overall story of general aviation airports in the Monterey Bay area.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just a little bit curious how Salinas compared to the other airports.
Yes, give me just 1 second. I'll actually pull up a table for you and we can compare that. right, I don't know if I'll be able to share screen and let you see it, but I'll just talk through the impacts. So altogether, all 4 airports supported about 2,250 jobs, contributing $170 million of payroll. This contributed nearly $250 million of value added to the regional, gross regional product, and about $442 million of total output. So just for some comparison, Marina did have the most on-airport employment just because Joby has such a large presence. So they had about 1,100 total employees with an output of 250 million. Watsonville had about 482, so just a little bit more than Salinas, 482 total employees for a output of 78.5 million. And then Hollister had 268 jobs for 40.9 million. So I would say Salinas and Watsonville are very similar in their impacts. Marina obviously has Joby that's driving their numbers up, but really strong contributions across the board.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Quick question on my side, real quick, before Matthew gets up. On your numbers in employment and in payroll, does the study break out the difference by government employment and non-government employment and payroll?
When you say that, are you talking about like the airport administration versus the business tenants?
Well, actually, I'm referring to the chart you had that just talks about payroll, and I don't know that it broke it out at all.
Okay.
So like on slide, what is it, 16, it's talking about total payroll, 32 million. Is there a sense of the percentage that's government versus non-government payroll?
The technical report does provide more of a breakdown.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
In terms of that, though, we only present the airport administration separately. Typically, just because businesses are a bit leery of providing what they might consider proprietary information, we don't publish the business tenant data versus like the FAA government data or anything like that. It's just split out between airport administration and all other on airport.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, Patrick and Drew, thank you very much for presenting tonight. Thank you for your hard work on this. I know it's been a Herculean effort. I'd like to have you be called on once again for City Council, hopefully next month, to present the same presentation. So we'll cut you loose. Kimley Horn, thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate the contributions from your team.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, have a good night.
Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Matt. That actually answered a question I was going to ask you anyway, which is the city council going to get a version of this? Thank you. We have 3 considerations tonight. The first one is an amendment to the air traffic control tower site lease agreement. Go ahead. Nope. We're back to the air traffic control tower site lease agreement. Matt's going to give us an overview.
All right. Okay, the first one we're going to tee up here is the amendment to the air traffic control tower site lease amendment between the United States of America Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, and the City of Salinas Municipal Airport. So in front of you, there is an amendment. I think it's the 3rd amendment to have the air traffic control tower exist there. So we're literally just talking about the land lease here. Very straightforward. The summary essentially allows us to provide another amendment, and the monies here will be, I had it here earlier. For this plot of land, we're looking at $575.50 per month. Annually, it's going to be $6,900 roughly per year. And so this is something that we obviously recommend that Airport Commission recommend to have it forwarded on to City Council. Dan?
Who owns, the government owns the building, the federal government owns the building?
That's correct. They own the tower.
Okay.
And we lease out the land,
Okay.
that plot of land to the feds. So, and so with that said, I'll entertain any questions or comments or considerations.
Anybody? Any public? Well, there's two of you out there.
Anybody online?
Okay, is there a motion?
I motion to approve as presented, to move it to the city council for.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Commissioner Sonia? Commissioner Bennett, absent. Commissioner Chairperson Bigham?
Aye.
Commissioner Contreras, absent. Commissioner McGregor?
Aye.
Commissioner Mancera? Commissioner Shoemaker?
Aye.
Or is it passed? So with that, we'll move on to the second consideration, janitorial service at the airport.
Yes, so instead of renewing the contract, we decided to go out, as it's good practice, to go out with a RFP. 13 proposals were received. The winner is the existing Carla's Janitorial Service. They've been doing very good work here. Incidentally, the cost of $37,140 per year is a 2-year term, and we're getting one more day of service at the airport, at the airport office, and it's only going up $50 a month. So it's a good price, good service, and so what we're doing is bringing this forward to recommend that we continue with Carla's Janitorial Service.
So it's just the executive office across the street from the airport? What about like the restrooms and the terminal building and all that?
They cover all that too.
Oh, so
Yep.
everything?
So that's all the
And the restrooms and the hangars at the?
yes,
the T-
correct.
okay,
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Did we do this like last year, or has it really been 2 years?
It's been 3 years. Yeah.
Seriously?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting old. Went fast.
So
Okay.
I'll
Wow.
so same company, $50 more a month, good services.
I'd like to move that we move this on to City Council.
Second.
We have a first and a second. I guess we'll go to the roll call.
Commissioner Sonia?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett is absent. Chairperson Bigham?
Aye.
Commissioner Contreras? Absent. Commissioner McGregor?
Aye.
Commissioner Mancera? Commissioner Shoemaker?
Aye.
Right. One passed as well. Our final consideration tonight is the airport access permit for Archer Aviation. Matt?
All right, here I am. This is actually very exciting. I think you're all familiar with I've been discussing this through the fence agreement. Anytime you have a piece of property that's adjacent to, proximate to an airport, you have to realize cost to have the ability to access the airport property. So what's great about this is we have not spent a dime. Kimley Horn, the same company, has helped shepherd this use permit through between Archer Aviation and the airport. If this is approved tonight or recommended, we're going to bring it to City Council as well. It's going to be $10,000 a month to the enterprise fund for the airport for Archer's ability to access through a motorized dedicated gate onto the airport property. That'll allow test vehicles like the eVTOLs to take off from one of the revetments there or take off on the runway as a CTOL, conventional takeoff lift type aircraft platform. If you're not aware, this is the former Coca-Cola building on 714 Van Buren. And is it Van Buren? Yeah. Or, yeah, what street is it on? 714 Van Buren. Yep. So $10,000 a month through the fence agreement. Very simple.
And who's building the fence, or
Pardon?
who is supplying the fence and
The-
the electrical that goes with it?
Archer's paying for all of it.
All those improvements?
Everything, all the TIs. Access to the airport is going to be borne by Archer Aviation.
remember we've talked about this for a few months now.
Yep. There's been some back and forth negotiations with Archer, but happy to present it to you tonight.
Other questions? Cool. No? You all a second or two? Entertain a motion?
Refer it on to the city council for approval.
Second.
Commissioner Sonia?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett is absent. Chairperson Bingham?
Aye.
Commissioner Contreras is absent. Commissioner McGregor?
Aye.
Commissioner Mancera?
Aye.
Commissioner Schumacher?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll roll into the administrative report. On April 17th, you may have heard we did have a off-landing emergency incident or accident. I'm happy to report out that both of the pilots were fine. One had a mild concussion. I arrived at the scene within about 4 minutes after the impact. This was right there by the core area, by Airport Boulevard and Skyway. They clipped a wire, turned the airplane around, and ended up landing tail first on the ground. So these are pictures. I do want to applaud our first responders. Fire and rescue were there. Fire and police were there within minutes to secure the area there. Here are pictures of the aircraft. And you can see the tail landed first, then sheared the gear off. We secured the area and stayed there till NTSB released the aircraft to the owner of the aircraft, and the aircraft was moved on into a vacant hangar on property. Any questions about that?
We have a local NTSB, or did they come out of San Francisco or San Jose?
It was all done on the telephone.
Oh, okay.
And so if they wanted to, they could have come down and dispatched the crew, like a 24/7 go crew. They elected not to based on the severity of the accident. Essentially, you had the walking wounded, they were fine.
Okay.
But you cannot move the aircraft until it's released by the NTSB. So.
It was a very long response time for you, I noticed.
Pardon?
It was a very long response time for you.
Rates and fees. We wanted to present this last month, but we did not have a quorum. So the rates and fees were approved by City Council. We're going to be raising them every other year. Last year was not a increase in fees, nor do we expect to raise fees next year. That's at the discretion of the airport manager. And the reason is I really don't want to squeeze out general aviation. If we continue to titrate up with the rates and fees, it'll eventually just really, really hurt general aviation. As you can see, the rising prices of 100 low lead and Jet A, we have to be mindful of not pinching our tenants here. The increase is a modest 3%, roughly, and that's going to hold this year for FY27 and FY28. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, moving
So
on.
that starts July 1st.
July 1st is when it
Okay,
starts.
Okay.
For those of you not aware, we did a runway extension analysis to see if we could extend the runway. I think many of you are aware of this, but just to repeat again, it'll be very difficult to extend any of the runways. The logical and most cost-effective runway extension really still is the approach end of runway 31 of the ILS, or the glide slope and localizer. With that said, the way that it would ever get extended, we believe it would be from a company such as Amazon or another billion-dollar company or a multi-million-dollar company that could justify extend the runway length there. So with that aside, I hate to say that it's going to be an upward hill, but it's going to be a battle to extend the runway in any direction. The good news is the runway length is still satisfactory. It's got about 6,000 feet of usable runway for takeoff and landing. The one runway that's a little bit short is the precision approach, the ILS. That sits at about 4,800 feet. So if we could get that to another 500 feet in length, that would make a difference for break-in action. But we still have a very usable airport for takeoffs and landings.
Generally speaking, what's the largest size of aircraft we can handle?
That depends on, well, you can land a C-5 for the air
Okay.
show. The C-5 lands
That's true.
nearly empty. I mean, they're not at a max gross takeoff.
Right.
They're taking off with not minimal fuel, but enough fuel to get to the next location.
Right.
So realistically, operationally speaking, you can take 737 easily.
That's helpful.
Yep.
What's the largest that Monterey can take?
The largest that Monterey can take,
And the reason why I'm asking the question is if we had to become an emergency landing area for that. I couldn't even think of a reason why, but I'm sure there's
sure.
one out there.
We could accept, so Monterey can accept a 747, but you'd have to take runway and taxi signs down. I believe when the Pope was here in '87, they thought about flying at the 747 in there, but they realized they would have to take taxiway signs down because of the jet blast. They elected to go into Moffett, helicopter the Pope down to Laguna Seca. KC-10s or DC-10s is another size aircraft. In a pinch, we could accept easily a 737, easily C-130s we do all the time. So 737s, 757s actually.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure. All right. So just, if I can, my laser pointer. All right, good luck. Which button is it here? Okay. Can you see that laser right there?
Uh-huh.
This is the only area that could really be extended if we had unlimited funds. Now, why are you asking, why can't we just extend this here? The reason is this runway protection zone is not in compliance. We are grandfathered in because a road goes through it. If we were to touch 1 foot of runway here, that would trigger us requiring to shift the runway 1,000 feet to the east.
Oh, wow.
So we do not want to touch that runway.
Yeah.
If money were no object and we could get rid of Alisal Road to the east, we would have to slide and shift the entire runway by 2,000 feet to get to another 1,000 feet longer of 7,000 feet.
And you'd still have trouble getting an ILS in there because you've got hills off the end of the runway.
We would still keep the ILS to runway 13. Yeah, with the rising terrain, the precision approach will never work unless we shave the mountains down. So, okay. All right, so we do have Tor that's owned R&B Helicopters. He's had it for quite some time. He's decided to wind down his business, and he's going to be moving out of his leasehold in the month of August or September. He needs some time to sell and divest his company. What that means to us is that we're going to send out a notice of availability. That notice of availability will be published for about 30 days, allowing tenants to plead their case as to why they are the highest and best use for the airport. Examples of that would be a flight school. The highest contenders would be aviation related, of course. So we're thinking like a flight school, potentially another FBO. Don't worry, we're not going to have another FBO for some time soon. Another hangar that would support like a Rancho Cielo that would augment flight instruction, engine overhaul, things of that nature. So this will be published probably in about 45 to 60 days, this notice of availability. A little update here on May 3rd, we had a fly-in. This was going to be presented last month, but since we were not here, this is kind of old news, but May 3rd was a very successful fly-in. Actually, wait, we had no quorum last April, so disregard. This is current. May 3rd had a fly-in. All in all, very successful. It's a good way to reach out to non-aviation enthusiasts and let them inside the fence and also walk around airplanes. And then we had our May 9th Tenant Appreciation Day. That was a big success for those of you who were not there. You were missed. We had a really good turnout. We had a flower bomb competition that allowed you to drop a flower bag with a streamer out on the lighted X. And
Who
a
won?
Well, I'll let you know in 1 second here, because I'm going to have Jim, I'm going to put Jim on the spot here. And then we had a spot landing too, as well. After that, we had a presentation by Bob Kennedy, an aviation enthusiast, with photos about the history of aviation in the airport terminal. After that was a free lunch served, and we had about 160 participants, tenants, and friends and family attend the event. So Jim, did you want to talk about your winnings?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, it was great fun. We had a nice little spot landing contest, and who was it that won? It was Golden Boy, they call him.
Right.
What's his name?
Connor.
Connor?
Connor landed. Connor on the spot. Connor landed on the chalk, and you can see the little
On the
dust
on
of
the
chalk,
line,
which is
yeah.
pretty amazing.
I mean, it was a nice landing. No, you can't do better than that.
But Jim, how did you do?
I did not get first place. I did not get second. I got third. And my Bombardier got third, so we did pretty good. And, yeah, so it was a great event.
This is just proof that politicians can't be bribed. So, third place. So all in all, it was a great event. We're going to have it next year, same time, same month, we think. There's some pictures from the Tenant Appreciation Day. A lot of fun. Thanks to staff and the volunteers.
Does all this go up on the website?
It
Portions
is
of it?
not on the website, but we will be putting it on the website.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of nifty.
Yep. All right. And that is it for the June 25th. Oh, you know, I failed to mention too, we also had, I forgot to put this on the slide deck. We did have an EAA event last weekend, and it was a really good outreach for folks. I was out of town that weekend, but Jim was there. And could I put you on the spot again, Jim, to talk a quick little debrief on that?
Yeah, that was a great event. Sean hosted the Young Eagles at Salinas. Watsonville used to do their events in the summertime, but they found that they had more fog than they did have sunny days, so it works out to do it over here during the summer. So the EAA 119 from Watsonville ran the event, and we had 39 kids and 6 pilots, and did a lot of flying, and had a bunch of new kids. We have kids there that'll come back multiple times. Some of them, they're taking off and landing now. They do so much. But it was a great event.
And Jim, I think you took up 6 flights, was it?
I did 6, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Sophia did 6. Their 150 did 6 flights, so, yeah.
And it was a high participation with girls too, as well, this year.
We couldn't have done it without volunteers from Watsonville Airport that came over.
But I'm also talking about the students, the kids, the girls.
Oh.
We had this year a higher ratio of girls to boys, which is encouraging.
That's interesting, yeah. We had more girls fly this year than boys, and they make pretty good first-time pilots, too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Thank you, Jim. And that is it. So the next meeting is June 25th, next month. Thank you very much.
Any comments or reports from any of the commissioners? None? All right, we'll find ourselves adjourned.